And welcome back to the show. Well, we love supporting Australian cinema on this show, and of course there is a brand new Australian film coming out into cinemas this weekend. It's called In the Room Where He Waits, and we thought today we would actually get the man behind the film on the phone to chat a little bit about this amazing new Australian film. So welcome to the program, Timothy Despina Marshall.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. Great to be here.
No worries. Now, Timothy, tell us a little bit about In the Room Where He Waits. How did this film come about at the start for you?
Yeah, so In the Room Where He Waits is a queer psychological horror, very slow burn horror film, kind of similar to films like The Shining, It Follows, Hereditary, that kind of very tense, slow build-up. For me, the genesis of the film, look, I've always been a horror film fan ever since I was really young, growing up in the 90s. And as a queer person, never seeing queer people on screen in horror kind of as, I guess, the hero or the main protagonist, I was really interested in seeing how queer representation could be kind of flipped in horror and how, I guess queer horror could be looked at through, I guess, exploring themes such as I'm doing in the film, aging, loneliness, body image, through a queer lens, but also finding a way to bring the horror element into that. So it was really fun to actually figure out how to do that. And I guess with this, we're using a hotel room, so we're also using a really claustrophobic location. So the idea is that as our hero is unraveling, the hotel room is kind of morphing and changing and shifting around him and becoming more of a sort of horrific place as what he's feeling is kind of coming to life.
Was it a difficult screenplay for you to write?
Look, I was very lucky. I had two people in the story development, two friends of mine, Paradox Delilah and Dimple Rajaguru, and I brought the idea to them, and we had a story development sessions to put it together, which was fun. But it was certainly a challenge because you have to think about how this film is going to progress whilst remaining in one location. And it's certainly being a film that's a low budget. It's not something where you're using copious amounts of VFX and all that sort of crazy stuff. So it was really about how do we get really creative and how do we draw out that tension till it's just absolutely palpable, and really bring to life what this character is going through and feeling this sense of like grief that's unwinding for him as he's going through this breakup and grieving the death of his estranged father. And also, I guess, externalizing that within the room. So, we came up with some really amazing and fun ways as to how the room, again, would kind of become this character within the film. So, look, it took a while, but we had a great time doing it.
I guess the other important part to this film working was to find the right lead actor to play Tobin as well, and Daniel Monks does a great job with that. Tell us a little bit about how you went on the casting journey with this film.
Yeah, look, Daniel Monks is so extraordinary. We were just absolutely so lucky to have him involved in the film. When I began casting the film, I knew I wanted a queer person in the lead, but other than that, it was open casting. And look, I knew Daniel from previously, and I loved his film Pulse, and I reached out to him, knowing full well that he was probably going to be in London where he was based, and the timing actually was amazing. So we shot this during COVID, and I sent the script to Daniel and said, just in case you're around, would this be something you'd be willing to look at? And he actually was meant to be in a play on the West End, The Seagull, starring alongside Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones. And the play had just been cancelled indefinitely because of COVID. And he had to fly back to Australia, stay in hotel quarantine, and was now living with his mum. So he basically just said, "You've written a script about my life. Like, I'm currently living this situation." Like, it was kind of weird and uncanny, the parallels. So yeah, Daniel was really excited to come on board, and then it was a really great collaborative process working with Daniel because the script wasn't written for somebody with a disability, but for Daniel, it was really important that nothing changed. You know, he was really, really excited about playing a role that actually had nothing to do with his disability. You know, that it wasn't a film that was about someone that was disabled. It was a film about someone that was queer, and that his disability was, I guess, incidental. So, yeah, it was a really wonderful collaboration, sort of working with Daniel to craft the character and, I guess, bring something to screen that he could be really proud of.
Going through hotel quarantine like Daniel did, and then going into a movie like this, how did that affect him? Like, was he able to bring something to the role because he'd been through hotel quarantine, or did it affect him like in a, I don't know, almost a post-traumatic stress way?
That's so funny. So Daniel and I had done hotel quarantine actually a couple of times for work, and he'd done it once, and we thought it was hilarious because we actually both like had a really fun time in hotel quarantine. I loved it. I'm like such an introvert. I just was like, I could have stayed in there longer, to be honest. So it's quite funny in that sense because we both walked out of it being like, oh, that was just fine. But, you know, it just seemed like too great premise or too great a situation not to use, to have somebody trapped in a space. And I think also because I would definitely not call this in any way a COVID film. You know, we're using that scenario as a way to, you know, keep the character in that space. But it's definitely about the universal feelings that a lot of us have gone through due to that.
Yeah.
You know, one of which being grief, loneliness, and how we've had to kind of face a lot of those things on our own, where we haven't had the support that we would maybe usually have. So it's certainly, I certainly wanted to use that to accentuate the feeling of what we've all been through collectively.
Now, going back to the casting, once you had Daniel locked in for that lead role, did you then cast around him, or did you already have in mind who some of the other actors might be that you brought in to act alongside Daniel?
It was a little bit of both. So the character of Sienna is played by Despina Marshall, and I just offered her the role because she's a great friend of mine and also incredibly talented actor. So I knew that I wanted her in the film. You know, we reached out to Anthony Brandon Wong because, again, I'm such a, you know, huge fan of him, and he was very kind to come and support the film. And then, I wrote a letter to Susie Porter basically saying, you know, we've got Daniel in the film, and Daniel and I are both very big fans of you, and would you be willing to support us? And so that was something that then brought Susie on in the end as well. So it was great. But I had a lens to, I wanted to cast a lot of people in Brisbane. That was really important to me, having shot the film in Brisbane, that I would support local talent where I could as well. And then, you know, casting queer people where I could as well. That was also really important to me.
Definitely. So now tell us a little bit about the shoot. Like you said, this is a very claustrophobic feeling film. What was the actual shoot like when you were working on the film?
The shoot was actually really fun. So we filmed this at the Pullman Hotel in Brisbane, and at the time it was COVID, so the hotel had hardly any guests because the New South Wales border was closed. So they kind of gave us free reign. We had like 4 hotel rooms on one level. You know, Daniel was staying in one, the equipment was in one, the video split and the art department was in one, and the film set was in one. So it was this very contained thing, and it was quite a small crew. So we all got to know each other pretty well. But, you know, as claustrophobic as it was still a lot of fun, you know, and I think we made a really good point to try and get as many queer people working on it as well. So it felt like a bit of a family at the end. But my DOP, Ben Cotgrove, was, I think, ready to strangle me by the end, you know, having to contort his way into a bathtub with a camera so many times for the filming, because the bathroom was so small, and he was like, "What are you doing to me, Tim?" So yeah, it was certainly challenging, but it was good in a way, because we really tried to transform the room through production design to use it to the best of our ability cinematically as well. So I think actually having those limitations really helped us.
Yeah. And what was it like working with Daniel on that side of the film as well? Because of course we know that some actors, especially if they're a character actor, can really start to get affected by things that their character goes through in a film. What was that like working with Daniel on this film as well, where it's kind of like a slow burn into horror?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I felt very protective of Daniel in that process, and we spoke a lot about what the process would be for him going, deeply into that emotional place. And as a queer person, a lot of what the film is about it speaks to him very deeply. So obviously there was a lot in his own experience that he could draw from. So yeah, it was. We sort of discussed how we would keep it a very safe space for him, and that he would have his room to go to, and we made, I guess, that agreement as we went through. But yeah, look, Daniel is just such an incredible actor. He's just has this uncanny ability just to be able to switch on what it needs to switch on, and then be able to come back to a very calm place. And I think he's worked very hard to be able to do that. But he just was so incredible to work with in that way. He made my job very easy, but it was just beautiful because it was such a true collaboration.
Definitely. Now, this is the question probably a lot of the young filmmakers want me to ask that's listening. This is your debut feature. What did you notice was the biggest difference stepping up to a feature film from doing shorts in the past?
That's a great question. I don't think anything could have prepared me. I felt ready to do it, obviously, but looking back on it now and the amount of stuff that I've learned is so crazy. It's so crazy. But also that naivety is, I think it's a good thing, you know what I mean? Because if I knew what I knew now, I might be like too nervous to do it, because it's such a huge undertaking. It's hard to compare, having to switch your brain on for 3 weeks on a film set, let alone all the time before that, and keeping that decision-making process and your synapses firing while you're just so mentally exhausted. But yeah, I think for me, the key difference, if I'm looking back on it, is, I wish if I could do it again, I would want more time to prepare, but I feel like there's never enough time, and I think that when you're doing a short film, I feel like there's less at stake, and with a feature film, there's just so much more at stake. So, doing meticulous planning and really taking the time to actually fine-tune the script so that you're not shooting scenes that are actually just going to end up getting cut out in the edit. You've made those changes in the script in development, so you're being really smart about what you're then shooting, which is going to save you money, but also save you brain space as well, I think, is some of the biggest lessons that I've learned, for sure.
Definitely. Now, Timothy, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to head out and see In the Room Where He Waits in cinemas?
Look, I think, I'm really excited to share this with everybody. Horror film lovers, my queer people out there that love a good queer film. And I really hope it resonates with people. I think even though it's a queer film, what we're exploring and what we're looking at in this film is universal. And, so it really excites me to hear about who connects with it. And yeah, we've got our Instagram handle at In the Room Where He Waits, so people can head there to hear about any of the screenings we've got coming up across Australia and in Melbourne in particular as well. And I'll be doing Q&As at a number of the screenings. So yes, please come and say hi to me afterwards if you're there.